Good day, everyone. My name is Nunez Janabel F, and I'm from BSA English 1A. And I am here today because I will be presenting to you the outline of argument of Catcher and Nelson and Hanke and Kumar. So bear with me, and I will be discussing those. Catcher and Nelson. The worth and advisability of teaching students another language as opposed to refining their own has often been intuitively regarded as an acceptable matter of argument. The relevance of the distinction to linguistic and language teaching still evokes a great deal of discussion and debate. The fundamental opposition between native speaker and non-native speaker is one of power, and that in the event membership is determined by non-native speakers' assumption of confidence and of identity. The basic criterion remains the long-asserted requirement of exposure in early childhood, variously referred to as mother tongue, first language, and home language. All other criteria are what Davis terms contingent issues. That is, for example, it is possible, though perhaps difficult, for someone for whom English was not mother, home, or first language to acquire access and intuitions about his or her own grammar and facility in creative performance and so on. The contingencies reside in parameters such as contact with other speakers of the language, opportunities for active use of the language, and attitudinal evaluation of the user's language by others. Now we're going to Hanke, and Hanke gives an example of the problem to the video, but I'll just give a description about those problems. There are three problems, and I'll start with the first one, which is the Dutch versus German. So direction problems of intelligibility. A speaker of Dutch can understand German, but a German speaker can't understand Dutch. Second is the Chinese. There are three cases or examples that was given in which they have the same writing system that unites Chinese and its varieties. The phonology was completely different though, so the Chinese problem is quite clearly that we must distinguish between phonology and the orthography. Lastly is the Jamaican Creole. So the levels of intelligibility, that is speech versus writing, lexis versus syntax. Let's move to language and criteria or language criteria. So we have 5 language criteria. First is the standardization, second is the vitality, third is autonomy, fourth is the reduction, and 5 is the norms. First, let's talk about standardization. So languages involve a certain degree of standardization, that is the development of a grammar. Second is the vitality. It refers to the existence of a living community of speakers that distinguishes languages which are alive from languages which are dead. The third one is the autonomy. So a matter of feeling, and as a rather subjective criterion, a language must be felt different from other languages. It is also a matter of degree rather than an all or none criterion. The fourth one is the reduction, an interesting criterion that reduce written standards, reduce functions in society, help to distinguish varieties from standard languages. The fifth is norms. So norms between good and bad, where languages normally involve norms, varieties don't. The speaker of language have the feeling that they are good or bad speakers, and that good speakers, as good speakers, they represent norms of proper usage. So using this criteria, and there are even more criteria such as historical development of languages, does the language have a history or not, and their cultures, one can define how languages differ from one another and from their varieties, their subvarieties, which many linguists call dialects. There are three main types of variety or dialects, that is regional dialect, social dialect, and phonological dialect. So both terms variety and dialect are sort of head terms, considered head terms for several types of dialect. In regional dialect, so mostly the term dialect is associated with some sort of regional difference between the speakers of a language. So there is a degree of verticity in words, means that it is pronunciation. Next is the social dialect. So when people speak with one another, their language is always influenced by a number of social factors. And phonological dialect. So there are phonological variables that define these two types of phonological varieties, and if it's phonology, we call that accent. Now let's have Kumar. According to Kumar, there are another or different kinds of language. So language, it innate human capacities where it's natural and it's normal and avoidable and automatic capacity which it grows in us. But we do not opt to learn any language, but we have no choice but to learn language while growing up. So the underlying system of language gets unfolded and human mind works on it in a very subconscious way, and the entire process is very subconscious for the cognitive understanding of this capacity. Another is that language is fully structured system, which it has structure all levels like sounds, words, sentences, and discourse. Each one of these levels are relevant for independent study and understanding, but in the connection of understanding the relationship between language and society, the relationship between sounds, words, and sentences together. Language also defines human, so we do not use language and its part independent of one and another. The whole system when becomes external of individual, and in such a case it defines human. And also language, it is used in society, and the rules of language use are very systematic as well, in the same sense as we say language is structured. Also language happens to be both individual as well as social entity. And now let's move to dialect. So according to Kumar, socially loaded term and can be politically loaded term is dialect. It is also superficiality of the distinction, which is all natural language that people speak are acquired in the same manner. When we also speak different varieties, then what we speak is called dialect, or actually dialect. And to sum up everything, so first is degrees of intelligibility. With so many communication systems are classified as different languages, even though their speaker may understand each other more or less well. Also, in order to distinguish or to define what a language is, we cannot use the criterion of mutual intelligibility as the sole criterion. We need something more. So in many cases, it is difficult to distinguish the types of dialect from one another. The postulation of a dialect continuum seems to be a reasonable alternative. And in language, as phenomena remains individual as long as we are looking at the individual components. So several modules of language like sounds, words, sentences, and when we are looking at the internal development of language and how human mind interact with such a development and how it functions. and how it allows language to grow within and things related. Also, there is no distinction of language and dialect. And in language and varieties, the individuals only speak varieties because language includes several varieties within. The term dialect or language go all the way to making distinction between languages of individuals, which is also called dialect. People with power would speak could be considered language. The language of the underprivileged can easily be termed as a dialect, and that is the distinction of social and political load on the two terms. And technically, they are all the same.